Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about how to love your heart and prevent heart disease. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife mentor, and I am so glad to be here with you again for this week's episode, which is in honor of Heart Month. We're going to be going into all of this today as we shine an important light on this whole topic of heart disease prevention. You are not going to want to miss a beat, pun intended. But just quick, before we dive into that, I want to invite you to have a book club experience, but for the Women in the Middle podcast, and you can do that by joining the podcast club. It's perfect for you when you feel like you are deep into the midlife experience and craving connection with other like-minded women. The thing is, you are not alone. The podcast club is all about more midlife connection so that you can love your life more after 50. It's low-key, insightful, and fun. And there are prizes and sometimes surprises, and also the ability to cancel at any time, so you don't need to worry about that either. You can check it out at www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab, and you can join there. Now, let me tell you all about my amazing guest today, Dr. Tracy Paeschke. Dr. Paeschke is a board-certified cardiologist and health coach with over 25 years of experience caring for people with heart disease. After working for many years to diagnose and treat heart disease, she now focuses on prevention. She practices preventive cardiology in person at her Colorado clinic and through telehealth in several states. Dr. Paeschke employs the latest advanced lab testing and diagnostic imaging to formulate an assessment of the client's cardiac risk. Then she uses those findings to create a personalized plan to help people achieve holistic health. Dr. Paeschke is passionate about helping people prevent and reverse heart disease so they can enjoy a long, fulfilling life in good health. I know you're going to get a lot out of this amazing interview, so please enjoy. And remember that the information shared in this podcast is intended for your convenience, entertainment, and education, and isn't geared to your personal situation. It's not a replacement for care or advice from your own medical professional. So as always, you may have some things you want to follow up on, so please seek a suitable professional to advise you on your personal situation. Now, please enjoy. Hey there, so excited to welcome my guest today, Dr. Tracy Paeschke. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I have a lot of questions. Today we're going to be talking about heart health, and you, thank goodness, are an expert in cardiology and heart health. And we're going to ask all the questions and you're going to tell us all the things because this is a super important thing for women in the middle to understand. There's so much we can't do about our health. And this is an area where there are some things that we can do. So tell me a little bit how you got attracted to cardiology in the first place.
Oh, wow. So that was a long time ago. So when I was in medical training, I really liked internal medicine, right, where we learn about all the things. And I had a mentor that was a cardiologist, and he kind of steered me to cardiology. And I was very interested in it because it's very sort of exciting, right? You're doing a lot of procedures and helping people at very they're critically ill and you're trying to help them. And so it's a lot of adrenaline and I loved it, right? And it was, there's always something new in cardiology, right? So cardiology is sort of notorious for these big clinical trials where we're always getting new information and learning how to take better care of people's hearts. So it was very interesting to me and still is.
It's amazing that you found something that has maintained your interest for as long as it has. Don't we all want that?
Yeah, that's right. I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're right.
So the thing with heart health and our hearts is that many of us know, because it's hard to avoid from all of the news, that heart disease is the number one killer of women and men. But today we're talking about women. So tell us a little bit more about why it's such a big deal in our lives. What's the impact of this kind of disease?
Well, it has a huge impact, right? Because, even though you know that heart disease is the number one killer of men and women, and a lot of your listeners might, a lot of people in the general public do not know that. Heart disease kills more women than all forms of breast cancer or all forms of cancer combined.
Oh,
So, right.
I did not
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. So it's a huge problem, and I don't think there's enough awareness about the issue. But the good news is that the American Heart Association estimates that 80 to 90% of heart disease is preventable through lifestyle modification. So that's a huge empowering message, right?
80 to 90%?
Is preventable. Yep. That's from the American Heart Association. So that's the good news, right? So even though heart disease is prevalent, and most of us know someone in the family or a friend who's had a heart attack or heart failure. But the good news is that a lot of it is preventable. Some's genetic and is not preventable, but there's even if you get the genes for heart disease, we know lifestyle still plays a very important role. So it's a huge thing for us to be aware of, especially women. Women are always busy taking care of everybody else, right? And sometimes our health, physical and mental health, is kind of last on the list. So I think that, your podcast and platforms like yours are an excellent opportunity for me to just help educate people about heart disease, right? Just to bring it more top of mind, and then talk about how we can prevent it, right?
Yeah, so let's get specific. What are some of the lifestyle things that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I use the pillars of lifestyle medicine as my sort of foundation for good health, because this pertains not only to heart disease, but it keeps our brain healthy and prevents certain cancers, and keeps our liver healthy, and keeps our blood pressure low. So it's not like you have to do one thing for your heart and a whole set of other things for something else, right? So these foundations, these pillars of lifestyle medicine, are a good foundation for good health. So let's go through those. So the first one is a whole food plant-based diet, and we can come back and talk about them, or I can list them however you want to do it.
Well, you can list them.
So a whole food plant-based diet's one. Next one is move more, exercise, right? Movement, restorative sleep, stress management, social connection, and avoiding risky substances. So those are the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And again, if we can start there with those things, then we prevent a lot of chronic disease. We prevent heart disease. So that's a great place to start.
Wow. Tell me a little bit more about whole food plant-based diet.
Yeah. So you can ask 10 people and you'll get 10 answers about what's the best diet, right? But for your heart, there's lots of data that shows diets that use whole foods and plants as their foundation are the best diets for heart health. So even diets like the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet that you might have heard of, those are centered around fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. So again, using plant-based foods as the foundation, right? And then whole foods means foods in their most natural form. So the less processed food we eat, the better. Better for our blood sugar. It's better for brain health. Every day something comes out about processed foods. The average American, over 50% of their diet throughout a day is processed food.
Wow.
So we really need to focus on that and figure out how we can get away from that. So it takes some planning, because obviously it's easier to grab something off the shelf at the grocery store and throw it in the microwave, and we're all busy and got a lot going on. So you really have to think about it a little bit, right? So you have to maybe food prep on the weekend, make a big batch of quinoa and roast a bunch of veggies and just kind of throw things, get your tofu and where you can make bowls or salads kind of throughout the week. There are some good meal subscription boxes that'll help you experiment with different ingredients and different recipes. So I recommend those a lot. It's just, I tell people to start with a meatless Monday, right? Because food is, it's a weird thing, right? I mean, we just kind of grow up eating certain things and just because that's what we're used to, right? So we get the same stuff at the grocery store every week, right? So a meatless Monday gives you a chance to maybe try some new recipes or even tweak recipes that you love. So maybe you love to have tacos every week. So instead of putting ground beef or shredded chicken in there, leave out the meat, right? Just do brown rice and black beans, right? With your lettuce and your salsa. Leave off the cheese even. So just think about new ways to eat. And so a meatless Monday lets you experiment with different recipes, different ways of cooking. Because again, some people, have never made quinoa, for example, or, some of those different ancient grains. So it just gives you a chance to try some new things, and it's a good start. And, a lot of people that I know, that I work with, when they transition to more plants and less animals or animal products, their cholesterol drops, their they lose weight, really unintentionally, but, just because it's a cleaner diet, right? And when you lose weight, your blood pressure drops, and, they feel better often, right? It's better for your gut. So eating more fiber that you get from these plant-based foods increases the fiber in your diet. Fiber helps you poop every day and takes out calories and blood sugar. It's sort of nature's way of keeping things moving, right? We know that when you eat a plant-based diet, you have a healthier gut microbiome. So there's a lot of new things coming out, how important the gut microbiome is in good health. So it affects not only heart health, but brain health. So it's a huge thing. And we know that, some of the original clinical trials were done by Dr. Dean Ornish. He's a cardiologist. He took people and he did angiograms of their arteries where they go in and shoot the dye. And then he put them on a whole food plant-based diet with good stress management and exercise. And he took, in the study, then he took another picture of their arteries and he documented plaque regression just with, just with diet, exercise, and stress management. So that's how important it is and how it can really impact your health.
Well, thanks for being specific about that. And I love that just starting with something small is still a step forward. And thinking about all the things that you want to change can be very overwhelming, and then you don't do anything. So, let's take a look at moving more. What can we do that's not running a marathon?
Right. Yes. This is a tough one, because, a lot of people, when they hear you need to exercise more, they think, oh, well, I don't want to join the gym and I don't want to run a marathon, so I'm not, so I like to stress thinking about movement in a different way. Okay. So for instance, a good example is the people who live in the blue zones. Have you heard of the blue zones?
Yes, this is a fascinating topic.
Yes. Yeah, right. So people who live in the blue zones, these are for people who aren't familiar, and there's a great documentary about it, by the way, people should watch, and there are books and recipes, so research that. But blue zones are places in the world where people live the longest in good health. Okay. These places have a lot, have certain things in common. And one of them is that the people who live in these places move more during the day. In other words, it's more natural daily movement, right? So whereas we sit in front of our screens working or scrolling or whatever for 6 to 8 hours a day, they are sweeping the floor, gardening, going for a little 15-minute walk around the neighborhood a couple times a day, scrubbing the bathroom. So again, more natural movement. So things because all that movement, that is good for our health too, right? We know that even exercise snacks, they're called, right? So when you're sitting at your desk working, set your alarm every 50 minutes and you get up and you move around for 10 minutes. You get a nap on your phone and do some calisthenics, or you walk around the office, or you do some jumping jacks. That's good. We know that people who even 5 minutes of exercise snacks throughout the day can lower people's blood pressure.
Again, that's huge.
Right. Right. Because it's not such an overwhelming thing then when you think about it like that, right? So getting up and moving during the day. Now, the American Heart Association recommends 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise every week. So that's like a nice brisk walk, 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. So I do think there is a place, because, walking, especially outside, is not only good for your physical health, but it's great for your mental health, right? So I do think there's still a place for going for a walk. But again, I don't think you have to sign up for the gym tomorrow or sign up for a marathon. Just think about ways that you can move more during the day.
Sometimes I don't feel like going out, like if it's really bad weather.
Right.
I'm a fair weather walker. So
Yeah.
I will challenge myself to walk my house and just see how
Right.
many steps I can get going around the pool table.
Yeah, that's
How many
right.
times do I have to go around the pool table?
Right. Or up and down the stairs. If you have stairs in your house, that's great, right? It's a Stairmaster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Right.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about restorative sleep.
Right. So this is a huge one too. It's recommended that people get 7 to 9 hours of restorative sleep every night.
Oh
And
boy.
most
Oh boy.
Americans, most Americans do not get that. So, sleep, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the importance of sleep, but the short version is sleep is hugely important for our health, mainly our mental health, right? Because sleep is the time of day when the brain solidifies memories. We know now that the brain has this system called the glymphatic system that actually cleanses the brain while we're sleeping. So, and we know that people who don't get good sleep have increased risk of dementia and Alzheimer's as they age. So sleep is huge. And there's some very strong connections with sleep in the heart. We know that sleep apnea, so that's where people, when they're sleeping, they have either very shallow breathing or they actually stop breathing and their oxygen level falls. That's called sleep apnea if you do it so many times an hour. But people with sleep apnea have increased risk of abnormal heart rhythms like atrial fibrillation. People may have heard of that. Increased risk of congestive heart failure, even things like stroke and sudden death. So,
Oh my gosh. I'm wearing a CPAP. I'm wearing a CPAP. That's me.
Good. That's good.
When I turn 60, I'm like, I'm going to take some things seriously that I can do something about.
That's right. That's right. So again, it's an awareness thing, right? So be aware that sleep is important. And menopause, menopause is horrible for sleep with women, right? Menopause also increases risk of sleep apnea. So, sleeping at altitude increases risk of sleep apnea. But it's not just sleep apnea. Also, just before I forget about it, sleep apnea makes your blood pressure more difficult to control.
Oh,
Yeah. So some people who have high blood pressure that's out of whack and they've done everything and they can't figure out what the problem is, sometimes they have undiagnosed sleep apnea. And if we treat their sleep apnea, their blood pressure comes down.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about sleep is, it's not just sleep apnea. Um, so that pillar is called restorative sleep, right? So when we sleep, there are these different stages of sleep, and the deep sleep is what is the restorative sleep. So even if we think we're sleeping 7 to 9 hours, sometimes if you wear like a wearable, you'll
Hmm.
find that you're not sleeping as much as you think you're sleeping. And even when you're sleeping, you may not be getting deep, restful sleep. So that's something I think wearables help with that, help again increase your awareness of that.
Yes, it helped me a great deal. And
Hmm.
it's black and white data.
Yeah.
You can argue with yourself as much as you want, but when you see something in black and white, it's like, oh, but I've had trouble increasing the hours of sleep. I think last year I was able to move it about 15 minutes more, but I find
Hmm.
it very challenging
Yeah.
sleep longer,
Well,
myself out of
that's
this.
right. So that has to do usually with sleep hygiene, right? So sleep hygiene is sort of the things we do the rest of the day that are going to affect our sleep, right? So what I tell people to do is think about it like when we're sleep training babies, right? I mean, you don't just play with your baby and, you know, rev them up and then throw them in the crib and expect them to go to sleep, right?
Right.
Right. We have this whole routine. We turn the lights down and we read or rock the baby to help them, get ready for sleep. So it's the same thing with adults that we need to do this. So I tell people to work backwards, right? So if you want to, and your wearables will show you this too. So if you want to get up at 6 a.m., then 8 hours is 10, you want to be asleep by 10, right? So you're counting backwards.
Hmm.
So you have to be in bed before that, right? Because you're not just going to fall asleep like that. So around 9 is when you're starting your wind down, right? So you your lights, even after dinner, you can turn your lights down. Again, you don't want any loud blaring stuff. You really, don't watch a stressful movie,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So around 9 o'clock, you're starting your wind down. Maybe you brush your teeth. You have some sort of regimen that you do that tells your brain it's time to get in the mode, right? So you brush your teeth, a warm shower, a warm bath is great around bedtime. Um, Laying in your bed, not watching TV or not looking at a screen, right? Because screens should go off about 9, about an hour before you want to go to sleep. So maybe reading a book in bed or, not on screen, but a book. Um, Journaling, writing in a journal, making sure your bedroom is cool. We know that cooler temperatures facilitate better sleep.
Oh, yes. I love a cool
Yeah,
bedroom. Yeah, that's
yes,
so good.
that's right. And you need to have a comfortable bed and you need to have, nice pillow and nice bedding. So you want it like an oasis in there, right? You want it cool and dark and quiet. So you want, maybe blackout curtains, fluffy blanket. If you don't have to have pets on your bed, that's good because pets wake us up even if we don't
That's a
know it.
good point. I have a big pet. He's not allowed on the bed, but
Yeah,
I used to have a cat years ago and I loved when he slept on the bed, but he was annoying.
right, right. And again, especially as we age, we need our good sleep. So those are some tricks for sleep. And then, things that you do even before the 9 o'clock cutoff, late meals, heavy meals,
Mhm.
fatty meals disrupt your sleep. Alcohol disrupts your sleep. Of course, smoking before bed disrupts your sleep. Even, a lot of people say they have a little alcohol to kind of wind down, but it actually messes with your sleep stages. So you may think it's helping, but it's not actually. Um, so those are the important ones with sleep. Caffeine, some people are even though, people say, well, I don't have any caffeine before bed. Some people, even if they have caffeine after around noon, they're just more sensitive to it and it disrupts their sleep. So it might be something to kind of experiment with.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the wearables because this was another thing that surprised me. I'm trying to eat earlier and earlier, and I'm being made fun of, and there are lots of jokes that I enjoy eating at 5 o'clock. But
Right. The
but
early bird special.
yeah, I love it. Bring it on.
Yep.
I did go to a gala a couple of weeks ago, and the meal was late. And then my ring asked me the following day, what do I think disturbed my sleep? And
Right.
it prompted me about eating late. And
Right.
I haven't, I don't typically eat at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that had a disturbed sleep. But like you said,
Right.
maybe it wasn't restorative. Maybe it wasn't
Right.
a deeper sleep. There was a change. And my
Yeah.
ring asked me about it. And maybe
Yeah. Right. And again, that's great because it gives you personalized data about yourself. And then you can figure out what it might have been and then try not to do that again. Because, just think if you weren't aware of that and you ate dinner at 9 o'clock every night, then your sleep is screwy every night, but you don't know it.
exactly. Yeah. The black and white data I really appreciate. Now tell us a little bit about stress management.
Yeah. So this is a huge one too, right? Um, Again, women especially, we take care of everybody else and we have 1,000 things to do. And we put our self-care slash stress management on the bottom of the list, right? So I tell people, and it's taken me 58 years to figure this out. But we have to put ourselves on top of the list, right? Because if we don't put ourselves on top, if we don't take care of our mental health, which affects our physical health, we can't do all the stuff, right? We can't take care of other people.
Exactly. And nobody else is going to, as much as people love us, if we don't do it for ourselves, it won't happen.
Right. And that's what I tell people. No one should care about your health more than you do. And
Mm.
no one does care about your health more than you should, right? So in other words, we have to we have to take care of ourselves. So stress management is a huge part of this and we need to put ourselves first. So then, again, I'm I think I'm about your age. I'm late 50s, so I have a little more luxury to it's harder, I think, for younger women to figure this part out, but I structure my life now around my self care,
Mhm.
right? So I have purposely structured my cardiology life, my work life around myself, my physical and mental health, and my kids' life, right? It's harder to do when you're, rising the corporate ladder or the things that we all do in our 40s and 50s, early 50s, right? But I think that's I mean, I could get on a big soapbox here, but I probably, but it does, but it does affect our health, right? So
Yeah.
in this modern society, when we're told we need to be able to do it all, especially women, right? We need to be able to work full time and take care of the house full time and take care of our kids and our aging parents and ourselves. There's not enough time and, energy to do all that. So we have to figure out a different way, I think. And so, I'm not going to change the capitalist modern society we live in, but I can change my life, right? So I can structure my life around self-care. So self-care, what does that mean? So this is stress management, right? Because again, if we take care of ourselves, what's happened is humans evolved, came from these little hunter-gatherer groups, right? There were 20 of us, and we were all related, and we lived with those people till we died at 30, right? And it was great. And so now we live in these modern societies where everything, it's 24/7. In those evolutionarily, stress saved our lives, right? So if we were walking down the path and the saber-toothed tiger jumped out, our bodies had a stress response, right? The cortisol and adrenaline go up, and our blood pressure goes up, and our heart rate goes up, and we become more aware, and we can run away or fight the tiger, and that's how we survive. So our stress response was made for that. Well, fast forward to modern society, now we are bombarded with stress in modern life, right? So the finances, the job, the kids, the aging parents, the wars on the other side of the world that we're faced, all of it, right? We see it all, we hear it all. And as a consequence, our stress hormones are in overdrive all the time. So that's what chronic stress does, right? And those stress hormones increase inflammation in the body, increase our blood pressure, mess with our glucose metabolism. It's all related again. So then how can we lower this stress in our lives? So we can set limits on our screen time. We can turn off the news. We can journal. We can sit in the hot tub. We can go for a walk. We can read a book for pleasure. We can get a massage every month. We can just sit outside and listen to the birds, right? So again, it doesn't have to be hard and expensive, and be more mindful, right?
Absolutely.
So meditation is huge. I think if we could all meditate 15 minutes a day, we'd be healthier and happier, right? There's a lot, or prayer, whatever your vision of it is, but there's a lot of data that meditation helps our brain, lowers our blood pressure, lowers our heart rate. And when you meditate, you become more mindful of just all of it in general, right?
Yeah.
And it helps you realize maybe what's going on in your life. What are the stressors? Should you address? How can you change your life to help those stressors?
Yeah, I find music too is another one.
Music is huge. Yeah.
Really, really good and very reliable. My
Yeah.
favorite songs, fast or slow,
Yeah.
I know guaranteed if I spend time and listen to them, it's going to help me. Yeah.
Right. Right. And there's scientific data for that too, especially classical music. There's something about where it hits the brain that makes us relax.
Yeah. So good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about the fifth pillar, social connections.
Right. Social connection. This is huge too. Again, the blue zones, that's another one of things that they all have in common is this big social network, right? If you think about modern American society, our families are separated. We live far away from each other, where a lot of us are working from home, so you don't get connection with your coworkers. We're busy, we're tired, we don't feel like going to a meetup group right? So this is another thing that we really have to be intentional about, because there's something about humans are social creatures, right? And there's something about humans connecting with other humans that's good for our mental health and our physical health. So we really have to mindfully, purposefully cultivate that connection.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing that comes up a lot working with midlife women is that we often don't have the relationships we thought we would have at this point in our lives.
Yeah.
And then it's like, memories of when you were 7 and needed to make friends.
Right.
You have to make friends. There's lots of reasons why we don't have those relationships, but you have to be intentional about it, just like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard because you feel kind of weird. You're right. You feel like you're a kid again or asking somebody out on a date,
We're stalking them.
Yeah, we're stalking. Right. It is funny. But again, I think if women just reach out to other women to go have coffee or tea or lunch once a month, I think most women are in the same boat. It's hard to meet women friends, I think, as we get older, especially when your kids are, because when your kids are little, there's a lot of school stuff and play dates and you meet women that way. But again, like you said, as we get older, it's just harder. So we just have to be creative about it. Speaking of creative, that's another thing that falls under the stress management. Play, right? Creativity and play, that's a huge thing that's helpful for stress management and self-care. So again, this is a thing, and it's what made me think of it when you were talking about when we were kids. Kids play all the time, right? That's how they learn, that's how they process. And then as we get older, we stop playing. So learn a new instrument, learn a new language, start crocheting or, coloring or painting. So something that taps into that creative part of our brain, that's great for our brain health.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually did a podcast episode called Why You Should Act Your Shoe Size Instead of Your Age.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? Because it really does. We were very playful back in the day.
Yes.
Back in the day. Okay, thanks for that. And then finally, the 6th pillar is avoiding risky substances.
Right. So obviously, smoking, hopefully everybody knows that smoking is bad for our health. Some people, smoking levels are lowest they've been ever, I think, but some people still smoke, and it never hurts to reemphasize that smoking is bad for our health. It increases blood pressure, increases risk of cancer, increases heart disease, brain disease, so lung disease, obviously. So it's, get help if you can't quit smoking on your own. There are lots of resources for that. Alcohol's a big one, we have this historically, people have said, oh, a drink or two a day is good for your heart, so you can have a glass of wine every day. They reevaluated that data where that recommendation came from, and it's not really, probably not a good idea for your heart or your liver or your brain. So I recommend that people don't drink any alcohol. And I think most cardiologists these days would say that don't drink alcohol for your heart. So alcohol increases blood pressure. It's a direct toxin to your heart. We know that people who drink a lot get a weakening of the heart muscle called an alcoholic cardiomyopathy. So that shows you right there that it directly affects the heart muscle.
Wow.
People who drink alcohol are at increased risk for abnormal heart rhythms. And again, I think because sometimes when you tell people you can have a glass of wine for your heart, it becomes, well, the doctors say we can drink alcohol. So then it's like, 4 glasses or a bottle, it just becomes this slippery slope. And we know that a lot of Americans have problems with alcohol. So I think, again, if you go by the old adage, the body's a temple, right? So think about everything you're putting in your body or doing to your body. Is it good? Is it good for me what is the benefit? So look at it that way. So what is the benefit to me and my health to have a glass of wine? Well, you could say, well, it helps me relax. Well, there are a lot of other ways that can help you relax too. Reading a book for pleasure can help you relax. Writing in a journal could help you relax. and then it doesn't have the negative effects of affecting your sleep or your brain or your heart, right? So it's just, again, being more mindful of what you're doing, and with the end question being, is this really good for my health?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps you weed it out.
Yeah. And we have responsibility for our health, coming back to putting yourself first. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for going over all of that stuff where we do have some ability to make some changes that can have a big effect. Now, I know that you have a lot to say about the different types of testing. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of tests are available and what's going on out there in that part of the world?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, actually. A lot of people haven't heard of all of it, and even some physicians haven't. Again, it's weird. Even though heart disease is the number one killer of men and women, there is no standard screening for cardiovascular disease beyond the standard lipid panel. You know, that total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides that we get maybe every year or two. So that's the only standard screening. Now, so we do have other lipids that we know are important, and we do have other testing we can do, but insurance doesn't pay for it often, mostly. So a lot of people, you know, they hear, well, if insurance isn't going to pay for it, either it must not be important, or I don't want to pay out of pocket, or they don't even hear of it, right? So that's really kind of a function of our messed up healthcare system, I think, right? So back in the day, you know, I use the analogy with breast cancer, right? So back in the day, right, we didn't get mammograms every year or two. We were told to do our self-breast exam, and that's all we had, and that was fine, and that's what we did. Well, then technology evolved, and we have mammograms, and we get great pictures, and even 3D mammograms now. And so we know that that finding breast cancer early prevents ladies from dying, and so there are routine guidelines for screening. So there aren't any routine guidelines like that for looking at heart disease other than that standard lipid panel. But again, there are things we can do. We know that, and I think those things are changing, these guidelines. I think at some point they'll have to be part of standard stuff. But as of now, if you're advocating for your own health and you want to know what's going on with your heart, we have to look, right? So population medicine is checking your lipid panel and saying, well, your cholesterol is a little high compared to the rest of the population. You might have some plaque. Here's some Lipitor. Take it for the rest of your life, and I'll see you next year, right? So that's kind of the standard what we hear. Well, but think about it. So the real question, it's not really, is your cholesterol too high? The real question is, do you have any plaque, right? Because if you have blockage in your arteries, your cholesterol needs to be really low. But if you don't have any blockage, then not so much, right? So that's the real question. Do you have plaque? Do you have blockage in your arteries? So that's where we get into this testing. So there are several different tests available now. One is we can do what's called a CIMT. So that's a quick ultrasound of your carotid arteries. Looks for plaque in the carotids, looks for thickness of the artery wall. We know that blockage, plaque, and thickness of the carotid is a surrogate for problems in the heart arteries, okay? And it's a pretty good surrogate. It used to be that's all we had. Still, you can get a CIMT in a lot of places. Again, insurance isn't going to pay for it for screening, but it's usually around $150 to $200. Then kind of the next step up on testing is a calcium score. So most places you can get a calcium score for around $100. Some states you don't even have to have a doctor's order. You just sign up and you can get it. And that looks at the calcium in your coronary arteries. So it's a CT scan, low levels, there's some radiation exposure because it's a CT scan, but low levels of radiation. And it measures calcium in the coronary arteries. So there should be normal is zero calcium. So if you have calcium in your arteries, that shows us that you have plaque. Now, it doesn't tell us where the plaque is or how bad it is or what if you have any other kind of plaque, but it tells us you have hard calcified plaque and you shouldn't. So see, that's a great information, right? So now it's not this, well, do you have plaque? Do you not? Right, we know. So then the next step up is a test called a CCTA. So that's a CT scan where they give you contrast dye in your artery and it lights up the heart arteries. And we can take this three-dimensional picture of your heart and look in the heart arteries, like looking down a hose.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's awesome. We get great pictures. Again, your insurance isn't going to pay for it for screening, but you can get it done. The price varies, around between $600 and $1,000. And you get these great pictures of your heart and it looks at plaque. And then they can even add, like the latest greatest is they add AI analysis of the plaque. So they take those CCTA pictures and they put it through AI, and this is called Clearly. HeartFlow's another one, but Clearly is the one that I use the most. So they take these pictures and they run it through AI, and it can tell you what kind of plaque this is that you have, whether it's hard calcified plaque, which is the more stable kind of plaque, or whether it's soft, vulnerable plaque, or whether it's inflamed plaque. So we get these, it sends these great pictures to people. It lays out your arteries and kind of color codes the plaque. So there's nothing like seeing your arteries to know what you have, right?
I'm speechless right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're awesome. So there are these great tools. Again, a lot of cardiologists don't send people for these tests because, well, first of all, most cardiologists are already seeing people that are past the preventive point, right? And they've already got a problem. But, I had a guy just yesterday that I saw said, well, I asked my cardiologist about that. And he said, no, it's not going to change what we do. Just take your medicine. So that's true. But again, if I'm going to have to take a medicine for the rest of my life, I want to know that I need it, right? I want to know what I have. And there, again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you tell me, if I see my picture and I've got a 30% blockage, I don't want that to get worse as I get older. So I might take some Lipitor to keep that from getting worse because there is data that shows that's beneficial. But if you want me to take Lipitor and I don't have any plaque, that's a harder sell, right? And it should be, right? So again, it's taking a more personalized view of people's health, right? So instead of the population-based, your cholesterol's high, take your Lipitor. Because I know this is me, right? I want to know what do I have and what's the best treatment for me for what I have. So again, this goes back to the lipids. So it's more than just the standard lipid panel. I want to know my ApoB, my Lp(a), my CRP, my NMR panel. All these things are advanced lipids that give us a picture of your cardiovascular risk beyond the standard lipid panel. And a lot of people haven't even heard of those things because, again, your insurance isn't going to pay for them. But we know that some of those markers correlate with, are associated with increased independent of your LDL, are associated with increased cardiovascular risk. So in other words, you can have a normal LDL, but if your Lp(a) is high, we know that you're at increased risk for having cardiovascular disease. Well, if no one ever checks your Lp(a), how do we know you have that? We don't. And in current guidelines, it's not recommended that you have an Lp(a). It is in Europe. That's in their guidelines. And the Lipid Association in the U.S. and put it in their guidelines this year that everyone have their Lp(a) checked once a year. And it will probably be in standard guidelines. But again, we want to be ahead of the curve. We want to be doing the latest, greatest stuff that could impact our heart health, right? We don't want to wait around until we have a heart attack to find out that we had some plaque in our artery, right?
This is fascinating. It's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. What do you think the main message is that you want to give women over 50? What do we need to know right now?
Well, I would say the main message is that heart disease is the number one killer of women. So we need to keep our hearts healthy. And there are lots of ways we can do that. And we've talked about that. You know, again, a lot of these things that cause heart disease are preventable and reversible. So it's not a lost cause. You know, if you have a family history of heart disease, you're not destined to have a heart attack. Or if you have diabetes and high blood pressure already, and those are risk factors for heart disease, that doesn't mean you're going to have a heart attack. It means we need to focus on those risk factors and get those risk factors as well treated as we can to prevent a cardiovascular event, but we can do it. And I guess that to turn it into a more empowering message, to empower people, women especially, to advocate for your own health, take care of yourself, and we want to live to be 100 in good health, right? So we don't want to just increase our lifespan, but we want to increase our health span. So we want to decrease the rate of chronic diseases. We want to live to play with our grandkids and our great-grandkids, right? We want to be healthy and active and vibrant. And women have a lot of wisdom to contribute to younger generations, and we need to be around, and we need to be involved, and we need to be healthy.
Absolutely. And I guess part of that is knowing your numbers, right? To advocate for your own health.
That's right.
When you know,
that's right. Know your numbers. So, you know, just like we know our height and our weight and those numbers, we need to know our blood pressure. We need to know our hemoglobin A1C, right? That's a marker for metabolic syndrome and diabetes. We need to know our cholesterol. We need to know our Lp(a), add that to the list. We need to know, I mean, there are a lot of things we need to know, but I would start there. We need to know our waist circumference. So we know that people who have an increased waist circumference, so you measure at your natural waist, women with a waist circumference over 35, men with a waist circumference over 40 have increased cardiovascular risk, increased risk of diabetes, metabolic syndrome, inflammation. When we carry fat around the midsection, that fat is more metabolically active, so it's inflammatory fat. So we should know that number and try to reduce our waist circumference. So yes, this is what know your numbers mean, right? So be aware of these numbers. Because again, you can't fix your blood sugar or the sleep. Let's go to the sleep example. You can't work on your sleep if you don't know you have a problem with sleep, right? And some people do, and they think they're fine. The same thing with blood sugar. You can't try to lower your blood sugar if you don't know what your blood sugar is. Well, that's what your hemoglobin A1C shows you. You can't know if you need to lower your blood pressure if you only get your blood pressure checked once a year at the doctor's office, and it's always a little high, and you and the doctor say it's because you have white coat hypertension. Well, maybe your blood pressure's high the other 364 days of the year, right?
Yeah.
So again, we need to be our own health advocate. We need to check these things. We need to be aware of our numbers. And if something's not right, you ask your primary care doctor about it. And if your primary care doctor can't help you, find a different doctor that can help you, you know. So there are a lot of good doctors that can help you with these things. And if it's an issue or a problem, you need to address it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So how can people best get in touch?
So the best way to find me is through my website, www.hearthealth.care. And I have a lot of free resources and some educational things, some blogs. And then I offer a free health consultation. So a free 30-minute, just if people have questions about their health. I mean, I can't be their doctor for that, but just general things and what they're needing, and I can help direct them, and they can see if they want to. I can certainly help them. So on my website, I offer a free health consultation.
That's great. And I'm going to have these links, of course, in the show notes. Dr. Tracy Paeschke, thank you so much for taking this time out of your busy day to help shed the light on what is really going on for women and heart health, and the information you provided. It was so accessible, and I think my head exploded a few times. So I just want to thank you so much. It's so important for us to advocate for our health.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's it for today's episode. Isn't it so great to know more about heart disease? That there are ways to look for heart disease, to control it before it causes problems like a heart attack. Perfect for Heart Month and every month of the year. Loving your heart is a very good thing. Okay, now remember, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be. If you want to get unstuck, clear about what you want with the confidence and courage to go after it, then don't waste another minute. Go ahead and book your free momentum call and apply for the Women in the Middle Academy. Let's see if it makes sense for you to change your life for good. Head over to www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com. The Women in the Middle podcasts are all about how to love your life again after 50 and be more intentional about your life in general. The focus, as you know, is about coaching you to incorporate mindfulness into your life as a regular practice. This is how you put yourself on your agenda. And, my friend, it's about time. Finally, for show notes and links, head over to www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 395. You'll also see links there for my new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you next week.